Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to take a fascinating journey into the creation of mastering alchemy. This has been one of those things that have been completed by more than 11,000 people, and we're being joined by someone who actually taught this very course, who has more than a quarter of a century when it comes to the experience of being an international speaker and author. He's also been leading seminars, teaching healing, clairvoyance, and personal energy. He's also had this special gift that he has retained a conscious awareness and ability to recall the experiences within the sleep state. Over the last 12 years, his awareness has expanded into relationships with the archangels, ascended masters, and teachers of light. His newest book is a course in mastering alchemy, Tools to Shift, Transform, and Ascend. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Mr. Jim Self. Jim, thank you for being on the program today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'll bet this has been a fascinating life for you. How did all this start? I mean, this goes way back to childhood, doesn't it?
It does. It does. See, most people kind of come into their body and they're still connected. That soft spot on the top of the head is really that connection to where you came from. And then as you begin to become aware of the circumstance you're in, 3D, and you start listening to mom, dad, teacher, minister tell you how it all works, you begin to make that disconnect. That soft spot goes away and you begin to forget. In a lot of ways, little kids walk around with their connection to spirit in the blanket that they drag around or the doll that they hold onto for another couple of years. And that's that voice that says, here I am. And in my reality, even though I kind of got rid of the blanket and the little doll, the voice never went away. And so it kind of followed me through lots of different circumstances. It was both confusing and always just simply there. That was very dependable.
Now, when we talk about mastering alchemy, first of all, describe exactly what alchemy is for our listeners out there, and
Sure.
What they should.
Sure. So alchemy is not the changing lead to gold as it was in the medieval times. That's not such a difficult task to do, but that's not really what alchemy is. Alchemy in the higher dimensions is really simply a way of life. It's being respectful, appreciative, do unto others as you would do unto you type of thing. But alchemy in this context, in the teaching, in the lots of conversations that are recorded in the book, instructions from the archangelics, the lords of light, alchemy is defined as the altering the frequencies of thought, changing the harmonics of matter, and applying the vast elements of love to create a desired result. So it's really the process of understanding how to change your thoughts and your emotions intentionally, really experience yourself in present time, and change the density of matter by using these aspects of love. And love is a vast, very misunderstood word. It's really a power. It's a presence that is a very creative force.
Now, you have had close to 12,000 people take your course, which was, from my understanding, about 3 years long. Now, what were they coming to you for that made them motivated to, A, take a course, and one especially that was that long?
Well, what are they coming? They're constantly there. So, see, the question that we all ask is more or less that who am I question, but more really people who are, everybody comes into the body with the intention of growth and expansion and awareness. And in the game that we play, third-dimensional game, to a great extent, people come into the body, they forget who they are, they forget who Creator is, and they bump around in the rules and game of the third dimension, which is duality, linear time, fear, and begin to make their way out of that space. That's really part of the game. We can talk about that more. But the aspect of people that come, they have a sense of more. And to an extent, religion has presented them with that spiritual side. But many people don't get enough out of religion because there's all large gaping holes in kind of the flow of who am I and how do I engage with the world, and what are all these aspects of this internal voice or the angelic realm that people talk about, but what is that voice in my head? And a lot of times that voice is very much the place where you say, I want more, and there begins to be an engagement. People want more, and so Mastering Alchemy lays out tools, begins to give you a sense of how to define yourself and understand who you are in relationship to that third dimensional world that's out there that I'm told to go to in order to get my well-being. And kind of how does that work for most people?
As it was said, perhaps in the Bible, the kingdom of heaven is already within you.
Very correct.
Mm-hmm. Now, there was something that I read about in your book here, and I found it pretty intriguing. I thought you might want to talk about this with our audience here, and that was that you had said that we are not the same person that we were as of the 11th of November, 2011. Now, what does that mean exactly? What happened there?
So let's even go back a little bit to set that up. So on a conscious level, on an awareness level, on an evolution of each one of us, and in 1987 there was something that came about that's referred to as a harmonic convergence, and that was an event that basically said to humanity, do you wish to change and grow, or do you wish to kind of continue in the format of this density of fear and duality, separation? And the overwhelming response at that point was from the you and me's of the world is we want to expand. And so in 1987, something changed. It was as if a new operating system was put into the computer to begin to upgrade the opportunity. That upgrading continued through numbers of iterations all the way into really about 2003, another major upgrade, not 2007, another major upgrade. But 2011 was the setting up of 2012. And 2011 was that period of time where Yeshua, Jesus, was talking about is the Christ will return to the earth. In 2011, a matrix, a configuration, a container, if you would, I'm trying to be real simple, called the Christ matrix, was brought back into the consciousness of both the earth and was placed into the heart of every human being on the planet, the return of the Christ consciousness. That was really to set up 2012, and 2012 was very much about a larger operating system put into the computer. And that operating system, the one we are now watching the world kind of going through lots of transition, that operating system basically said this third dimensional world, this world of duality, linear time, fear, separation, push and shove, good, bad, right, wrong, should and shouldn't, really has been satisfied and is no longer going to be a game that we're going to play. And from that moment on, that third dimensional door, that, if you would, and we can explain that more, that structure that said it's going to be the same way forever, that door was closed. So what you're watching right now is a shifting consciousness, a transitional consciousness. And one of the aspects of that transitional consciousness is you cannot take your baggage with you on this journey. And the journey is into a fifth-dimensional, multi-dimensional state of consciousness, which in simple terms is well-being. space of respect, dignity, appreciation, gratitude, appreciation, um, sense of humility, but basically a vibration. If you said to a person who was really happy, is this different than how you've experienced your life? And in that moment, it's like, yes, I wish it could be like this all the time. But then we fall back to depending on the external world for our well-being, and we lose track of ourselves. But that progression is a massive shift of all of consciousness.
Now, as you speak about the third dimension, you talk about that the third dimension is not a linear time frame. Now, describe exactly what that means here.
No, actually, the third dimension is a linear time frame.
Okay.
And what that means is if you went and asked 100 people on the street to define time, they would tell you past, present, future, and then you die. And you say, well, is there any variation to that? And they would kind of look at you funny, like, of course not. Time is time. But in fact, time is not time. And there's 5 different configurations of time that we get to play with in this body of work, Mastering Alchemy. But the real key piece is present time. Now, in third dimension, present time exists, but it's a little tiny slice. So if you think about it, where do you hold most of your attention as you move through life? And what people do is they have a lot of attention in their past. And in a way, I hope my past doesn't show up in my future. Or they hold their attention in the past that basically says, they told me if I would do X, Y, and Z, I would be in my future successful. So we are constantly not paying any attention, but moving between what was and what may be. We have lots of hopes and fears and prayers and wishes and, oh, I hope this does or doesn't happen. When you get into present time in the third dimensional box, and there's a set of really rules and structures to each one of these dimensions. But in that third dimensional box, when you get into present time, it usually is what's referred to as a reactionary present time, meaning, oh my God, this wasn't supposed to happen. Well, there you are. You're right now. Nothing else is going on but right now. But you're in this reactionary state. Versus a fourth dimensional box, if I was to be real simple, in present time, fourth dimension, where you and I are talking right now, is we're not paying any attention to breakfast this morning or dinner tonight. We are right here. One of the differences in fourth dimension is you have something called choice. Now, you live in the third, fourth, fifth dimensional space is available simultaneously, so there's no one or the other necessarily unless you create that. But in a fourth dimensional space, you have choice. In a third dimensional space, you have reaction. But right here, this word choice becomes really very important because I can choose to agree or engage, or I can choose not to agree and not to engage. But there's a real important word in fourth dimension in a simple way, and that word is paradox. And this word paradox is what allows you to get out of all those stuck places that you're in. I'm stuck because in third dimension, this happened to me 10 years ago, and I cannot change it. It's fixed. It's absolute. It's always going to be like that. But in fourth dimension, where we're talking right here, the word paradox means what was true a moment ago or false a moment ago may not be true or false in this moment. So if you hold yourself hostage or you have a set of beliefs that says she is always going to be bad, he is never going to be trustworthy, as you move through your life, there's no room for flexibility. There's no room for the possibility that that person has shifted in their awareness. In your own personal awareness, there's no room. My mother told me I was bad. She didn't know why she had me. She wasn't sure she loved me, and then she died a minute later. That's an absolute. There's nothing I can do about that. But in real terms, there is everything you can do about that. But you can't play in a place of flexibility, mobility, fluidity, and hold on to never and always as absolutes.
Now, it's fascinating when you think of dimensional thinking, and you talk about how in the book that present time actually defines what is known as the fourth dimension. Now, why is that?
Well, see, if you live in the past and the future, the past is fixed. You can't change the past. It is absolute. But when you begin to get into this present time space that we're talking about right here, well, let's say this person stole from me when I was, 10 years ago, and they're a bad person, and they're always going to be a bad person. But in this moment, you get a knock on your door, and you open the door, and there's that person standing there. From a third dimensional standpoint, you'd say, I know who you are. You're that bad person. Get off my porch. You're never going to be welcome here. But in a fourth or fifth dimensional space, I remember what you did. Nice to see you. How can I help you? What would you like? And that person says, 10 years ago, I stole from you. My life has been chaotic because I did something misaligned with myself. It was completely wrong. I've been guilty all this time. And I finally realized that I simply can come and say, I'm sorry. Here's your $10 back. I made a terrible mistake. And this is where that little passage right in the middle of the Lord's Prayer comes into play. Forgive me for my trespasses as I forgive you for yours. It doesn't say when you get your act together, I'll consider forgiving you. It simply says, I'm stuck, and I'm choosing no longer to hold on to what has got me stuck. So I'm going to forgive me for what I'm doing. I'm going to make amends with you, and I wish you a good life, but I can't change you. You may be really angry at me, and I'm saying very genuinely, I'm sorry for what I've done, and I hope you can get over it. But for me, I have just freed myself up from my guilt, my bondage into that state of being, and I'm going to kind of dust off my proverbial sandals and get about my life. I can let go of something I did, recognizing what I did, and I can make amends as best as possible, but I don't have to hold on to it to drive my future.
Now, early in the program, you talked about a grounding cord. What exactly is that?
There are aspects of each one of us that comes with the body. A lot of aspects, your clairvoyance, your clairaudience, your clairsentience, all these skill sets that you have come with the body. But some very fundamental things that come with the body is this grounding cord. And the grounding cord has a tremendous amount of value. It's like if you put your hands under water when you have an anxiety in the body, that concept of grounding off that energy, the anxiety. Grounding cord is a line that goes from the first chakra, tip of the spine, to the center of the earth. And it does something specifically. It grounds electricity. Now, let me come back to this, but thoughts are electrical, emotions are magnetic. That grounding cord not only has one straight line down to the center of the earth, it's like grounding your toaster or your refrigerator. Whenever there is a surge of electricity, the grounding siphons off that electricity. There is also a coil that's wrapped around this grounding cord, and that coil dissolves the short circuits, the emotions. And so if you have a thought, you see something, this makes me really angry. One of the things that happens to us in a third dimensional space is most people are unconscious of being unconscious. So I see something and it makes me angry. But before I even get to have a thought that says, this makes me angry, an emotion slams right into the thought, and I'm amplified into a reactionary state. You stupid person, why did you do that? This makes me really angry. When you begin to move into present time, when you begin to do a number of things, define your space, we'll talk about in a second, the ability to start to become conscious of your thoughts and your emotions, begin to change the whole way you move around in the world. But that grounding siphons off both the thoughts and the emotions and allows you to choose an engagement or a response rather than be reactionary in your emotional mental body.
So it sounds like what a lot of people tend to do is that they're kind of out there in life, meandering around. They think sometimes they make choices, but for the most part, they kind of feel like they have to take whatever life brings their direction. And you usually hear them talk about things such as fate, or it was meant to be, that sort of a thing. But what I was reading in your book, it's when you can move to that state that you're truly in the present moment, you realize that in each moment of that present moment, you truly have choices, regardless of thinking about the future or making that choice based on an experience from the past. That's pretty empowering.
It's extremely empowering. It's basically, here I am, I'm standing right here, I have multiple directions I can turn, versus a person who is both unconscious of being unconscious and very steeped in the past and hoping, praying, wishing for the future. You really don't see other choices because the past is absolute and the future is kind of my plight in life. And that's never correct. But as long as you play the past and future game, which is what we've been taught is the only way there is, nobody questions time at all. It's in that space of shifting, realizing I have the capacity to choose is extremely empowering.
So it's a matter of, one of the things is mastering your thought process. That's the first thing that we need to get to and find. I remember when I started doing it, seemed like a series of interviews based on, how the mind works, neurobiology, things like that. And I started thinking, it couldn't really be this simple. All these years I've been living this particular way where you find yourself in a reactionary state to things, and people would say, well, I don't react to things as much as, people think I do. But the truth is, when you find situations that kind of come across your path, you realize the way that you actually perceive and experience that moment. And when you can catch yourself in that moment, in that reactionary phase, then it's pretty empowering to realize, wait a minute, where is this coming from? A good example I like to use is there was a time that I wanted to take my dog onto basically a streetcar. And there was a lady who decided she seemingly, to me anyway at the moment, had a problem with this and was asking the driver about this. And I started getting pretty upset about that. In fact, I got so upset that I got pretty enraged about, kind of getting in her face about, who are you to be telling me I can't bring my dog out and, this and that. And the driver was saying, she's just asking me a question whether or not that's okay. And anyway, lo and behold, I sat for the moment in time and I go, okay, now where is this coming from? Mm-hmm. And I had realized that it goes way back. And it's funny when we always say talk about our childhood, but how much of that is a reality?
Exactly.
And what was quite fascinating about this is I really calmed myself down. I realized what was bothering me is that back in my school days, as I always found myself going to the principal's office, is that I felt there were people that always decided what I was going to do next. In other words, my fate was always in someone else's hands, and they were always making those decisions for me. And I felt that's what was going on here. And here I'm a much, much older adult. And I realized at that moment, boy, this just doesn't work too well. This just isn't working for me, and I don't like the way I'm feeling. And not only that, but I've also probably screwed someone else's day up, so to speak. Yeah. And I came to a point, believe it or not, and it only took me probably 5 or 10 minutes. I'm going to say closer to 10 minutes. She was riding on this trolley, and I went up and I apologized to her because that was
Yeah.
pretty hard. But see, the thing was how I reacted to what she was doing. You know, it was someone who was, to me, making a decision that I had nothing to do with, no say, no anything in. That's the way I perceived it, but that's not really what it was. So you can see, you know, in that situation, I realized how empowered I was at that moment to change that course. And I actually felt not only much better about it, especially in apologizing to this person here, but I started realizing, wow, how often do we make choices or not make choices based on the way we perceive things or experiences, maybe from our past, thinking this might be the outcome in the future if we make that choice.
Exactly. So there's your past and future circumstance. But let's take it even a little bit more from there, because you did something else that's in a way even more empowering, is you recognize that what my past experience was is not something that necessarily has to drive my present experience. And at that minute, you simply short-circuited and neutralized that previous belief that said, if X, then Y. And so you let something go that was electromagnetically, thoughts are electrical, emotions are magnetic, really bound. And in that context, think about it. You know the difference between happy, enthusiasm, laughter, and jealousy, rage, and depression. And if I said, well, which one feels better, there's no question. But when you're in those states of jealousy, anger, depression, you ever notice how tight the body gets, how less mobile? There's very tremendous restrictions. And so what you think in terms of combining with emotion has a direct impact on the physiology of the body. But more so what happens is we make decisions. So I tell a joke, and I think it's really funny, and I'm a sophomore in high school, a girl, and I'm trying to fit in with all the other girls, and I've got all kinds of things going on in my body right now, and I'm trying to figure out life, and I tell a joke, and everybody laughs at me, not with me. And all of a sudden I make a decision, and it's the response is first, uh-oh, this isn't good, a thought. And then it drops into emotion that says, oh, they're laughing at me, this doesn't feel good. And then we kind of move away from that, but we don't let go of it. And we keep thinking, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? They don't like me. I'm not attractive. I don't fit. Nobody's going to ever hire me in a job. And we think these thoughts and wrap them around that thought and emotion. And pretty soon we get pretty wound up. But we can't continue to carry around this for days and days and days. So we basically make a deal with it. We say, look, I'm just going to put you over here in this little box called denial. And I'm just going to pretend that that never really happened. But in fact, it still comes up and nags at you. So you make a second decision. I'm going to put you back here behind me in my backpack. And I'll make a deal with you. If you never come out and bite me in the butt again, I won't go anywhere near those girls. I'll stay away from them because I don't want to have this experience. I'm embarrassed. And what we do in that one instant, we basically create a sense of I'm not okay. And then we carry it around in our backpacks. And we move through life avoiding them. And then we have another experience, and now we're avoiding those others. And you ever seen one of the people who just simply don't have a lot of flexibility? And you say to them, hey, would you like to go to lunch? And they go, yeah, oh, no, I can't do that. Because I might possibly step on one of those squares where somebody will remember I told a bad joke when I was 13 years old.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And we create that life, and we carry it around, and we ask the worst question we can possibly ask in life. We all do this. We simply have this constant question in different capacities that says, what did I do wrong? What's wrong with me? And here's one of the most important parts of all the Mastering Alchemy work. Basically, you cannot be not okay. It's impossible. You can wear shoes that are too small, a shirt that doesn't fit, it's the wrong color. People can perceive you in that outfit, and they can look at you funny. But really, the outfit is all the stuff you're carrying around in the backpack. that's masked by I'm not okay. So in real terms, what somebody says is, here, I'm going to give you a gift. I'm having a real bad day, bad lifetime at this moment. And here, you don't look nice today. I don't really love you today. I don't care for you. You're never going to be smart. What's wrong with you? And they hand you this gift. And what we do, particularly as little kids, we accept it. And then it doesn't feel very good, and I don't like it. And we ask the question, what did I do wrong? What's wrong with me? The reality, all that you're dealing with is trying to figure out somebody else's bad day that's now you're walking around with. When you get into present time, the ability to realize that that circumstance that I feel really uncomfortable about my life happened when my uncle was drunk and fell down and then basically said these comments about me, and I was 7 years old. And why did he say that? Why did he say that? Is what we carry in our head all the time, even though it's generally unconscious. It's semi-conscious. And we shape our entire life by about what the drunk uncle said that we've never seen again anyway.
You know, now this is a moment in time that we come to beliefs. And it's really a fascinating area when you think about the fact that I think a lot of people feel that they have to stay true to their beliefs. And I guess I've come to that point in my life, and I can, in reading the book, A Course in Mastering Alchemy, that you probably will agree with this. Beliefs are impermanent, and they're made to change, because sometimes, many times, you'll have beliefs that just don't serve you anymore, but you'll hold on to those things like, this is your arm or your leg. Right. Let's talk about how we come to think of beliefs as being static and solid rather than permeable and changing.
Well, let's set it up in this way. I'm going to tell you that most of the beliefs you think, and most of the thoughts you think, and most of the beliefs you hold don't belong to you. They're not your beliefs. They're not even your thoughts. So you basically are in an engagement with a group of people, and somebody says, people with blue hair are bad. I had this experience with them, and they're all bad. You don't know anybody with blue hair. But you basically go, okay, and you don't pay much attention to it. And 2 days later, another person says, yeah, I had a bad experience with people with blue hair. And you go on about life, and then somebody says one day, gee, I just met this person with blue hair, and you say abruptly, people with blue hair are bad. Well, how do you know that? Oh, I know that. I just know that. But no, you don't. You don't know it at all. You just have heard it and accepted it, and then you may have repeated it 2 or 3 more times to that same person, and you say, no, they're bad. And the guy says, oh, okay, I'll stay away from them. And so now what you did is you just anchored it. You told somebody and anchored it. And then you start watching people with blue hair. They come from everywhere all of a sudden. They're everywhere. They're only everywhere in your reality. And you basically say they're not okay, they're not okay, they're not okay. You create a habit. So you create an experience, you create a belief, you create a habit, and the habit becomes an unconscious action. And that's what beliefs and thoughts are.
And as I said, people really hold on to these things, though, as they are the gospel. And speaking of gospel, as we were talking just briefly about religion, just yesterday I think I was reading something, let's say in the Yahoo News just very briefly, about a woman who actually had decided to shoot her family. And this was based on being shunned by a particular church. And how often I've heard things, maybe not that extreme, but for instance, here's a couple that decides on a divorce. The particular church they were both going to decides to shun one or the other in favor of one or the other. And I think to myself, who are these people that make these decisions? And why are they doing the particular things that they do? It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, but those beliefs that we walk around with, one of the things that, see here, let's go back to Course in Mastering Alchemy. So you've got a grounding we talked about, and we also begin to be in present time. But one of the things that is really an important tool in in understanding yourself is, in a simple terms, where do you start and stop? Now, in real terms, you don't start and stop anywhere. But one of the things that happens is when I'm around a bunch of people, for example, they're all talking about different things, good and bad and up and down. All of that energy is passing through me. I'm not discerning, and I am also feeling off balance with some of the emotions that are being talked about or demonstrated. So one of the tools that is really valuable is where do you start and stop? Now, in practical terms, again, there's no place. But if you were to take your hand, your arm, and stick it straight out in front of you and turn the palm of your hand towards you, that is approximately where the edge of your aura is, that energetic field that surrounds all living organic things. Everything has an aura. And that aura goes all the way around you. And if you were to create make a decision that right on that edge of the aura, you're going to create a point of delineation. And we use a tool called a rose, just a red rose. And now think about it, if you put the red rose right out in front of you at the edge of the aura, and you made a decision that I'm going to pull my energy back to my side of the rose. I'm going to stand on my side of the rose, and everything on the other side of the rose is Shakespeare's theater to entertain me. So I'm going to be grounded, I'm going to be in present time, I'm going to be on my side of the rose, and I'm going to observe what goes on. If you can do that, and it's not complicated, but it takes a little bit of practice because it's a shift in how you live your life. If you can basically stay on your side of the rose, what happens is a lot of things that are both being said in Shakespeare's theater and a lot of things that are moving all around you that you usually engage with, you realize they're just noise. They have nothing to do with me. I can observe it and then choose to engage or choose to not engage. When a person begins to play with that tool and they start to, and grounded and in present time, you start to find that a great amount of what you do in your day is babble. It's noise. It has nothing to do with anything that has added value to you. And you begin to get quieter, and you start to find that that engagement really is very time-consuming, and nothing really comes out of it. You ever listen to people just talk and talk and talk and talk, and if you say, what just happened, you realize nothing just happened. They talk about the clothes that's hanging on the clothesline, and the wind was really hard this day, and the sun didn't warm it up enough. Well, so what? But that's where most conversations are.
Speaking of conversations, it's funny when people decide to share an experience with you, but yet they restrain by simply saying, well, it's a long story. And I remember I got into this habit with people many years ago where I started saying, no, the story isn't as long as you think it is. What happened? And then they realized, you're right. It wasn't as long of a story as I thought it was. And I said, but that's the thing is, you decided to create a big, long story around an experience that was very brief in time. But for some reason, you decided this has to go on for infinity for some reason.
Yeah. And if you pay attention, you realize there was not a whole lot in it. And then you also pay attention to it. You watch people, you say, gee, I just bought some new blue socks. And they say, oh, I bought blue socks once too. Let me tell you about my blue socks. Are they listening to your story, or are they just jumping in and babbling? And when you pay attention from your side of the rose, you realize how little substantive information or really interesting information or quality information or opportunity to begin to build relationship with that person goes on in that babble.
Now, I liked, as I was reading in your book again, for the listeners out there, we're talking with Jim Self, and a book is A Course in Mastering Alchemy. And, as I was reading, you were talking about these energy waves, very powerful waves of light. And you say that two of these are very much about disengaging the electromagnetic fields of thought and emotion that are misaligned with our current third-dimensional state of experience. Yet there's a third way that assists in easing this transition so that we can actually move from the duality of the third dimension and have an easier state in the fifth dimension of well-being. Now, what happens there in this fifth dimension? We've actually talked about this fifth dimension on the program, and I've come to realize you really got to be careful with what you're thinking, because it really seems to, I would say, as you evolve yourself spiritually, and that doesn't mean to say that you're better than other people, but the fact is, when you're in a spiritual state, which we all are, and you begin to know this, that your thoughts tend to actually manifest a lot faster. And to give you an example, just yesterday, I was sitting out and I was waiting for a bus to take me somewhere. And I don't know why I was thinking of showing up at a place in a tuxedo, much as if I was going to a wedding, okay? And just, how people would react, boy, you look pretty sharp today, what's with the tuxedo, that sort of a thing. And realizing how enjoyable it is when you dress up like that. Now, as I'm briefly just having this kind of, I guess, call it a movie playing in my head, someone I know shows up right in front of me at the bus stop and just simply says, "Hi, Daniel, how are you doing? Good seeing you." And he's standing there not necessarily in a tuxedo, but very well dressed as though he was going to a wedding. And I thought, wow, I didn't think much about it at that moment. But later on, I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. But that I find those kind of experiences that seem to happen with regular frequency in the last few years. So I simply say that it is very possible to have what you want with a level of ease that you wouldn't expect, pretty frequently. And this is for all of us. And that's almost miraculous in many ways, I would think.
Yeah. So you never get thrown out of the fifth dimension, but you fall out regularly. And that fifth dimensional space is about well-being. Just keep it in that real generic state of affairs. Well-being, kindness, respect, appreciation, dignity, co-creation. In that space, you don't hold thoughts like safety or trust simply don't exist in the fifth dimension. There is nothing unsafe, and there's nothing to distrust. But so the question is, well, why? I get that. Why don't I stay in the fifth dimension all the time? And it goes back to what you said earlier about beliefs and thoughts. I'm carrying this baggage in that backpack. I'm worried that they're going to know that when I was in fifth grade, I stole a candy bar. I'm really concerned that people are going to think this or do this. See, the reality is we spend most of our time going to that third dimensional world. The mom, dad, teacher, minister said, and so I'm living my life based on what they said to do. And in order to make sure that people like me and I fit in, I have to do for them what they need so that I'm okay. Now, that's an awful lot of work. And that's where people play. But you get knocked. You when you go into that fifth dimensional space, it's hard to stay there because you're carrying around all that stuff in your backpack. The I'm not okay. So one of the things in the Course in Mastering Alchemy, the beginning part is, if you could have a handful of tools and a way of perceiving yourself and engaging with that third dimensional world in the context I'm in the world, but I'm not of that world. If you had tools, would you be able to like yourself more and recognize that I'm okay? One of the sets of tools that becomes very important is, again, thoughts are electrical, emotions are magnetic. So in order to kind of begin to perceive your world, what if you could build a platform? And the platform was made up of words. Sound, tones, as we call them, are words. And one of the things, if I said, well, Daniel, do you know about, have you ever been certain? And generally the person's response is, oh, yeah, I know what certainty is. And I say, okay, so that's a mental response. I know what certainty is. But if I said, Daniel, take a breath, close your eyes, and would you feel what certainty feels like? Now, that's a very different place. It's not an intellectual place. It's a feeling. And your body will straighten up, and your head will go back, your shoulders go back. You'll take a little deeper breath, and it's like, yeah, here I am. I feel this. So what if you could build a platform of words like certain and capable, gracious, seniority, like I'm going to own myself. This is who I am. And you put those words together, you begin to weave them into a triangle, let's say certain and capable and happy. And I said, put those feelings together and feel them. Now, just can you be them? What you just did is you created an alignment with the internal guidance system in the heart that never left you. It's always been there. We leave. We're the ones who walk away from our internalness. But when you can be certain, capable, senior, happy, gracious, have a sense of commanding your presence, you're better than nobody. You're just creating a vibrational field of well-being to experience yourself. See, that's very different than depression, anger, worry, hope, fear. You create the reality by altering the sense of words and feelings, thoughts and emotions that you align in the body. That's when you get into that present time state of well-being and you think a thought, and in a fifth dimensional space, what you think shows up much quicker than when you coat it with worry and hate and anger and bigotry and sexism and racism and all those kind of words that coat the thoughts and the emotions. Does that make any sense?
Well, it does, and it got me to thinking, too, when you consider the language of people, what comes out of their mouth, the things they say, and also the energy of which they say them. And you talk about, in your book, living words. And I found that fascinating because you realize people who tend to use, and you call it a label if you want to, but we're not, it's simply an observation, who tend to use more foul language, more aggressive language, tend to be those people who don't feel they have choices in their life. So this is the way that they push the world back by saying, look, I'm not going to let you at least get to where I am right here. Then when you find people who seem to talk with more eloquence and pace, they take their time and they smile. These are people that not only know they have choice, but they exercise that fairly regularly. In other words, they're very proactive with their lives. They realize that they're getting, that personal power. And then you have people who are silent. They don't say much of anything, but you just see this calm presence about them. And I'll tell you a really wonderful example is Sakyong Mipalm Rinpoche, which is the son of Trungpa Rinpoche. I actually had the opportunity where I had met and interviewed him on a book that he had out. For people who may not be familiar with this gentleman, his father used to tend to see him a lot in spiritual books being talked about. And they set up the Shambhala meditation centers in Colorado and also up in the Northwest in Portland, Oregon. And what was fascinating about this man when I met him is I received him in the lobbyway of the radio station that I was at. You could feel this tremendous sense of calm surrounding the whole room. I mean, you could feel this. And it was pretty amazing as he was walking in there. He had this small entourage of people that basically kind of, if you will, were almost like holding the train of a wedding dress kind of a thing. These people were there to serve him. But this calmness, I never got over that feeling of what it was to be around someone like this. But yet when you sat there and you talked with him, he engaged you lucidly and in the moment. Would laugh, and you're like, well, this kind of, at that time, and this is, we're going on over 16, 17 years ago, that you wouldn't expect that. You just expected someone who would kind of sit there and reflect and bring something as it channeled through them, that sort of a thing that we tend to see in movies. But in fact, he talked pretty much like if he were sitting at a bar with a guy having a beer after work.
Yes.
That's what I found fascinating about that.
See, this is where all this work in Mastering Alchemy in the course goes. Basically, you once you begin to define yourself, you realize that you can choose to engage with the world. You're not subject to the world. And then you begin to find that there is more to you than you previously understood, even though you thought there was more to you. And there's mechanical things that go on. Spiritual is very mechanical in terms of changing energy frequencies, magnetism, electricity, adhesion, the different rays of creation, applications of color and sound tones. Those are all action creative structures, all of which make up everything you do every single second. But there's an aspect of that as you begin to change the brain and access things called the Eye of Horus, which isn't a necklace you wear around your neck, and you begin to change that mental, emotional body into one body, which is what it was always meant to be before the fall of consciousness. But it's in that place of evolution, your own ascension, you start to bring this living light into the body, and you reconstruct that living light body. And so what you just defined in that gentleman is a state of light, a state of presence, a state where the person is very present, very engaging, and yet nothing moves in their space. They begin to hold a vibrational field of that Christ consciousness, which is an aspect of Creator. It's not a religion. And a presence that you feel that presence in their presence. That's the pathway of every human being on this planet. But when you stay in that third dimension, push, shove, right, wrong, going to the external world for validation, there's no understanding of quiet, presence, observation, choice, nor is there an understanding that you can raise the vibration of the light in the body and begin to play with much more of the more refined frequencies in these higher dimensions, which you already know. When you can get quiet, you begin to remember yourself. And that's what this whole course in Mastering Alchemy is all about. It's taught by the archangelics, by the lords of light, Yeshua, Metatron, Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, Mother Mary, Anna, the mother of Mother Mary. They're the course. They're the ones who teach. It's transcribed, and it's audio conversations between myself and those beings saying, here's how this works. Do this. What happens? It's not about a truth. It's about a set of actions and an experience, and basically engaging in these levels of light that you find in words like enjoyment, gratitude, appreciation, all the foundational environment of the fifth and sixth dimensional states of being.
I know I've even come to a point now when people ask, how would you best describe, let's just say, your work ethic, or what do you think you bring to a team? And I said, and it was funny how these just came to me like less than 6 months ago, but I realized this is exactly who I think I am. Adaptability, enthusiasm, and initiative. And I thought to myself how powerful those three things are to bring to any given circumstance, you know,
yes.
and how I came to actually, not necessarily channel, but for lack of a better way to describe it, that's how it came to me. And I thought, that's exactly what it is. You know, I like to bring a level of enthusiasm and playfulness to the things that I do, especially with other people. I like to be able to adapt to situations, you know, to maximize the potential of whatever may be happening, to get to that level of enthusiasm and playfulness. And I like to take initiative that if nobody else wants to jump on the dance floor, and I certainly want to dance, then I'm going to jump out there and dance first.
Sure, absolutely.
Let's get the party started, for crying out loud.
Right. Yeah, so it's a presence. I mean, you use three words there, and when you think of them individually, they all feel good. But when you align them into, I'm going to call it a triangle, a state of structure, because when you play in the physical realm, you need geometry, structure. But when you put those three words together and you say them yourself and you kind of feel them, just as you did with the laughter in your voice, this is who I am, is what you're saying. And I like me in this space. See, and that's one of the really big pieces. Most people don't like themselves. They're so busy trying to get validation from others and figure out how to do what others need. Quite often, we don't really like ourselves when I'm wearing the shoes that are too small and the shirt that's not the right color, but that's what they said they wanted. When you begin to decide, I like me, what makes me happy, enthusiastic, joyful, pleased with myself, you start to find that you function differently in that present time moment. You begin to realize, I've been doing this, hanging out with these people at the bar because they're kind of my friends, but I really don't like the energy of the experience. When you begin to be you, I like me, I'm on my side of the rose, I'm grounded, I'm in the center of my head, I'm perceiving from present time, I begin to choose a reality that I'd like to create rather than continue to do things that fit in with them because I don't have anything else to do. You start to find, in that case, I will tell you real clearly, you are going to begin to lose some of your friends. Because as you begin to move into well-being, they're going to stay pretty much where they are. They're going to be less interesting. But we lose friends all the time. People come and go through our life all the time. Also in that space, as you begin to hold a greater level light, a lot of them are bored with where they are. They don't want to be where they are either. And they start to match you. And that's where that nature of uplifting, nurturing, well-being the world into a better state of being is being found.
And as Marianne Williamson has been so accredited, although she said to me that it wasn't really me that made this up, it was something I found somebody else said, but I put it in my book because I found it was so inspiring, was about being the light. And when you do realize that you really become powerful beyond measure. And I think a lot of times people are afraid or they fear this idea of being powerful because I don't know that they really understand what personal power can truly be. And if they do, they would realize personal power isn't about you lording power over others, but it's having that personal power within yourself to know that in every continuous moment of your life that you breathe in and out, you have a power of choice. And if you just remain calm and realize that the choices you make are for the betterment of yourself, that things just really seem to almost work out pretty easily, almost. Would that be accurate?
Oh, incredibly accurate. And see, one of the things where people get stuck, spiritual people, they're supposed to be in service to. But in reality, it's not a 50-50 game. It's 100% empowerment, present giving to yourself, and 100% giving to others. The magic of all that is, and when you're in the present moment, in this conversation, for example, I'm pacing you and you're pacing me, and we're looking for opportunities how to make 1 and 1 3, take something to the higher road, more enjoyment, more pleasure, more excitement in the process. And how can I be of service to you and simultaneously appreciate myself in the moment? So when you get into that present time moment and there's a quiet presence that you begin to understand, the demand of the outside world is very much noise upon us that really isn't our noise. And so you start to get to a place of discerning what is it that I would like to experience in terms of my own personal evolution and my engagement with others. And sometimes it's as easy as I say, well, when was the last time you went for a walk along the creek? Oh, I love that walk along the creek. I got to do it again. I haven't done it in years. Well, why not? And let's go right now, walk along the creek. See, we postpone our enjoyment, our sense of our own well-being in terms of doing something for others, whether it's healing them or whether it's just I'm supposed to. But here, in this period of time, this is a very significant transitional period. I said earlier, you cannot take your baggage with you on this journey. So personally, all of those lies and stories and secrets, things we don't want people to say, count on them coming to the surface. Now, wouldn't it be nice if you had a set of tools and an understanding that those things are coming to the surface, like little air bubbles underneath the water that are coming up, just popping to disappear? Most everything you hold yourself hostage to is a story in the past that really has no value to you in the present moment. And that's where that course in Mastering Alchemy and the tools begin to allow you to perceive yourself from points of reference different than you perceived yourself in the story of mom, dad, teacher, minister. And you begin to find your own freedom, and you realize in your own freedom and choice, a lot of the stuff I'm carrying has absolutely nothing to do with me and never did. And then you begin to like yourself.
Pretty amazing when you can stand in the bathroom mirror and actually say that. And it comes to the end of our program, and I think both you and I would probably ask these listeners out here the same question, and that is this. If life got easier for you right now, would that be okay with you?
Oh, big question, a big question. And a lot of times the answer is no, because I wouldn't know what to do.
Right, exactly.
Well, pretend you do know what to do and try it out. I think you'll enjoy it.
Absolutely. Now, Jim, first of all, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program. I'd like to re-invite having you back on again, because there's some other things we took an hour just to get this far, but I think if people really sit and they absorb what we've been sharing with each other here, they'll realize, I'm starting to think I get that light at the end of the tunnel they're talking about here. Now what? Well, I'll just keep moving in that direction. That's what you do. Yeah. But there's a lot more tools in here that you have in your book. And the book is A Course in Mastering Alchemy, Tools to Shift, Transform, and Ascend. Jim, I know there's a website people can also find out more about your work.
Sure, masteringalchemy.com. And the thing about the book is a multimedia book. So there's a whole there's a chapter, and there's do this, and then go to the website for the book, and there's meditations, there's lectures, there's articles, all related to that particular topic in the book. And the book is 365 pages long with teaching, construction, lectures. So enjoy the book. It's on Amazon.
Well, if you could leave our listeners today with one particular exercise that they could go out in the world today with, why don't you go ahead and do that?
I would go back to that rose. So simple exercise. Stick your arm straight out in front of you. Turn your palm towards you. And that's the edge of the aura. It goes all the way around you. And create a point there. I'm going to suggest use a rose in your mind, a mental image. And basically it's a point of delineation. And bring your attention to your side of the rose. You stay on this side of the rose. The first thing you'll recognize is I'm now in present time. Here I am, right here. And basically walk around with that. Now make it a game and it's play. It's not serious. But basically observe from your side what's going on the other side. You can stand there and talk to somebody with this rose. And what happens is their energy winds up staying on the other side of it. Now, there's an exercise. You can go to masteringalchemy.com, and there's a 20-minute video of here's how it works, here's all the information. But that one tool, stay on your side of the rose and observe the world from that place, you begin to see a very different reality than the reality that you assume all day long.
Wonderful, wonderful. Jim, thank you so much for being on the program today and sharing this information with our listeners.
Daniel, my pleasure. I'd be happy to do it anytime.
Absolutely. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can also take the reality that you're in now and discover more at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50, where we encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter. Keep up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50, as well as our upcoming shows. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.